Okay, we have a little time. We do have a claim settlement, but I thought it would be worth our time just to take a few minutes. Let's limit ourselves to, say, 15, 20 minutes, just to discuss the budget, because I do think it's important that you all, each of you coming from different parts of the city, I know you all recognize the seriousness of the issues that are going to be facing us, but that we begin sharing our priorities and thinking through. And just to give you a little context so that we're all kind of clear on the same page, when we first got elected, when our administration first came in 2003, we had a $70 million budget deficit with a smaller budget, but still a significant budget. But there was a difference in the sense that we hadn't had a lot of cuts the year before. We had a fair amount of low-hanging fruit. There were some efficiencies. We brought in Michael Lukaitis and people that centralized a lot of agencies and did a lot of that. What we're seeing this year is a very different animal. One is that we cut $86 million from this year's budget already, right? And that we saw today a couple of things, that equipment purchases. In other words, we have moved and bended and adjusted everywhere we could to make sure that fire trucks, Councilwoman Fotz, police vehicles, snow plows, that we have the vehicles there, that we're going to make sure we deliver the essential services. But that bending and squeezing will limit significantly our ability to deal with what we see coming forward. And the $120 million deficit that we are faced with now is it is dramatically larger and will be dramatically more difficult. And the drop in revenues, we're projecting now total revenues a drop of somewhere in the 5.5% range. Marcia.
We understood from the budget office that there was going to be not just a zero-based budget exercise, but a zero-based programmatic analysis of what we have in the city, because if we could figure out that there was something the city had taken on as a service that it could excise as a service with some agreement of the citizens, that would be something we could do. We've had these meetings in my district. No one is able to really identify flat out a service that they can imagine living without. And I'm wondering where that analysis is in process. And I would simply point out that I think in bad times, the city is asked to do more, not less. So
Absolutely.
Before we even think about cutting personnel, I think we have to look to the income-producing side rather than the any kind of cut in personnel, since we're already 300 and some positions short.
First of all, I had a conversation yesterday with staff in the mayor's office that I found very productive. And I have become aware that not only is Kelly Bruff saying that what she spends her time doing 24 hours a day is thinking about the $120 million and trying to bring it down, that I've also become aware that you, Mr. Mayor, have been looking outside of government to try to get some ideas to reduce also. And I am really pleased to hear that, because the diversity of input is going to be really important. The one other point I want to leave you with, though, is sometimes in a case like this, although it's extremely painful, and there are going to be things that people think they can't live without, that they are simply going to have to live without with government. We have been also dealing with a 5% structural deficit, and I am truly hoping that the one bright light out of the examinations that we have to do with this budget, and it's one of the reasons I've been hitting a number of the structural issues, is that ultimately perhaps we can make a dent in the structural deficit, that if we handle it right, for instance the vacancy savings and the way we handle that by actually eliminating some positions as opposed to just carrying them year after year and calling them savings, such. At that point, we might actually be able to make a dent in that structural deficit that will really serve the city well long term. So I don't mean to minimize the pain. I've been through it at the state level when one year it was called the St. Valentine's Massacre or St. Patrick's Day Massacre or one of those. But it was the massacre is the key word, and it is extremely painful. On the other hand, sometimes you come out healthier.
I think that it's very, very important for our city that we keep it clean and maintained, because I think that with families that are going through all these critical times, to walk out your front door and see graffiti and see tall weeds and to see things that are a slap in the face. And I think right now more than ever, the essential services that you were talking about, Mayor, are really important, and that visual blight will have a negative impact on our families, on our city workers, and even as a city that's trying to attract tourism and generate revenue. And so I really believe that if we're able to keep the weeds down, keep the graffiti down, keep people safe, and promote a healthy community, that in itself will also help people stay as positive as we can through these hard times, but it'll also give them, that extra support that they need.
On the new revenue sources, obviously, that's not my favorite approach to this. But I do want to point out that when we talk about the impact on citizens, keep in mind what is happening with the federal deficit. You mentioned the state. Schools are always looking for more money. RTD, heavens knows, is looking for a lot more money. And in the meantime, the citizens are struggling. And here we have the city. Never see yourself in isolation as just one level of government. A citizen is experiencing these levels, and in some cases there might even be more, where you have the metro districts and such that might be added on top of this. So that's one of the reasons why I am so hesitant to look toward, not necessarily increasing fees that are a specific delivery for a specific person to cover the cost of actually delivering that service. But I just think we have to be very, very careful, because we tend to say, well, gee, I'm going to compare this city with that city, and that means we ought to raise taxes. You can't do that. You have to look at the impact at every level.
And so everybody is going to have to, if they want what we provide from government, you're going to have to pay for it. And that's, I think, we are doing our citizens a disservice if we don't have an honest conversation about that we can continue to keep the city clean given current revenues. We can continue to provide safety and all these other services that they want. I think we're lying to them if we say that we can continue to do it with the current rate of revenue. 5% structural deficit, I'm as aware of that as you are. I think you and I disagree fundamentally on how to close that gap, but I think you and I both share that is a priority, and I don't think we can continue to lie to our citizens about that gap and that somehow we can magically make it go away.
Thanks.
We got to be honest about some of this, and Rick's point of we do have to think long term, even though we'd have an immediate problem. And I guess last, I just want to say, I'm always the one who's talking about balance and middle of the road, but we're in this together. And I worry about our city employees that they feel, rightfully so, and maybe that the budget gets balanced on their back. And so if we don't say to citizens, that as we cut these services, and if that means jobs go, that they need to carry some of it too, then we're not in it together. It's sort of simplistic to put it that way. I mean, it's much easier said than done. But I really am one who believes we've got to do both. We've got to look at the revenue side, hopefully not in parking tickets, and also look at the fee side and in the income side, the revenue side, and we're all going to have to share. And I think if we just can admit we're in it together, we could have some confidence about how we move forward.
Right. Well, I think that notion of confidence, how important that is. I mean, each of you in a different way said that, and ultimately, the only way we're going to get out of this is to work our way out, and that requires that confidence. And I think you're right. We'll probably find a way to make everybody a little bit angry at us if we're lucky.